Hey folks, Evil Pajamas here with the follow-up to my initial Antman playthrough video where I took on Expert Rhino and Antman had a pretty easy time with it. I tried out some other aspects with Antman and did not have as much success, so I decided to go back to the leadership aspect and sort of tweak that deck a little bit, and then you can see in the background here that I am taking on Expert Claw. So this video won't be focusing on the playthrough going back on in the background very much there, but more of an analysis on the starter deck list and some improvements that you can make, and some of the reasoning behind that. So here's what the Ant-Man deck list looks like. So starting with the leadership aspect cards, the first card that I would target for considering for replacement is Call for Aid. So you might say, well, hey, this card costs 0 and it replaces itself with a card that you probably want. So that is true, but so if you look at the starter deck list, it has all of four Avenger allies there on the list: Ant-Man, Giant-Man, Ronin, and Stinger. Apologize, five because Wasp is one of the cards as well in the actual Ant-Man set. I think arguably you'd be better off considering here just adding three Avenger allies instead of this card. And part of the reason I say this is because one, you're going to get hit with the reshuffle penalty faster, and there is no discard retrieval effect in the deck that would give you a reason to want to put a bunch of cards in your discard pile. Because Marvel Champions also isn't the type of game thus far where you want to rely on some staple card that you absolutely have to hit to make your engine work. Um, that this card would need to retrieve for you. So I think that you are just better off just straight running more allies rather than this card, and would consider cutting this in favor of additional allies if you'd like. So going down the list, there is Moxie, and I had actually taken this card out on my last playthrough, but I am going to probably put it back in. So I think my initial bias against this card is I've actually never liked the other cards that are the buffs for attack defense until the end of the round. So I was initially biased against this card, but after considering what I think are the best strategies under the leadership build and some of the advantages this card has over other until the end of round buff cards, I definitely will probably be putting this card back in. So the reason for this is I think that one of the really strong strategies that can be be used around Ant-Man is to really exploit his 3 attack stat along with some of the buffs he can get for changing into giant form, and those buffs stay out as upgrades and are triggered when you go into giant form. So Ant-Man's cards include 2 giant strengths, which will give you +1 attack after changing to giant hero form, and those are conditions, so they stay out. So that if you get both of those out on the table, that is going to put you at 5 attack on a giant form Ant-Man. So if you stay in the leadership aspect and and you have all of the additional content for the game, then at that point, I think when you're talking about 5 attack without even playing any cards, just changing form, you're going to want to consider, sort of exploiting the Earth's Mightiest Heroes card from the Rise of Red Skull set. I myself had increased the number of Avenger allies in the deck from starting from the base 5 to closer to running somewhere between 13 and 15 typically, if I'm running leadership, with all of these allies being Avenger allies. So at that point, you're talking about a third of your deck being allies. So, this won't frequently be a dead card. You do give up the allies actually being able to take their action. But I think when you're talking about 5 attack, just based upon effects that are already on the table and not including other things that are in your hand, you're getting a lot of value out of the Earth's Mightiest Hero card if you have the Red Skull content, and would suggest possibly building around this card with the leadership aspect on Ant-Man. Now there is, of course, what after I mentioned how many allies are being run on the deck, and they're all Avengers. There is the obvious additional choice if you're more of a orc shaman kind of fan, the Marvel card games equivalent of Bloodlust here. So the next consideration you're going to want to make is whether or not you really want to run 6 ally upgrades in your deck, which I find sort of odd. You know that there's 6 ally upgrades for 5 total allies in this starter deck build. So all of the allies that are in the starter deck do benefit quite a bit from upgrades. So there's no criticism there. It's just a question of whether or not you're going to want to commit 6 slots to ally upgrades in your deck. And I think additionally, you have to consider that these are max one per ally. So it's like the way it's designed, it's basically sort of saying like you're gonna have all of your 5 or at least 3 of your 5 allies out and not have duplicates of these upgrades and be able to spread them out like that. I think at minimum you would want to consider at least replacing some of them with Sky Cycle, which is an upgrade for again from the Rise of Red Skull set, which it can be exhausted to ready the ally, which also has good synergy with the other card that we looked at previously, Earth's Mightiest Heroes. So moving on to the basic cards, I cut the 2 first aids that are in the starter deck. I like that card, but I think between the 2 copies of Pim Particle and then Ant-Man's helmet, that there is enough healing in the deck already without running 2 first aids. But again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that card necessarily. So even in running as many Avenger allies as I did, I still decided to cut the 3 copies of Team Building Exercise. Obviously, it is slightly, it doesn't have counters on it, so you don't have to deal with that, but it has, it costs 1 less than some other cards that have a similar effect, and then doesn't have the counters that will run out. So, even with like running 13 to 15 Avenger allies, I still didn't like the card. Um, I just with this type of resource card, I think I'd rather just have 3 counters, to be honest with you, and use them and get rid of the card rather than having the additional restriction about what type of card that this is going to benefit from this. And I think I guess if there were more cards that just had like giant or tiny on them necessarily that shared a trait with the hero but didn't necessarily have like the Avenger trait, I think that would be possibly a better option. But again, I guess it's preference. I myself found that I didn't want to have to work around the limitation on the card. So those are my thoughts on sort of what you'd like to consider maybe if you want to stick with the leadership aspect on Ant-Man, but maybe want to have a bit of improvement over what you're provided with the starter deck. Obviously, I do think this is dependent on whether or not you have the Rise of Red Skull pack and have access to those cards that I sort of mentioned that sort of drive that engine of swinging multiple times with Ant-Man. I do have the end of the footage here from the Expert Claw run that's been running in the background here, and I'll cut to that part here, and you can sort of see I do end up getting the finish with I was running 1 copy of Avengers Assembled in this particular deck. Also, if you like the content, please do click like. Please leave any comments below, questions, whatever you'd like, and if you'd like to see more content like this, please hit subscribe. And then I will pay 4 resources for Avengers Assemble. Ready each. Actually, sorry. Let me. First attack. That will bring him down. I have 5 due to the giant strength, so that'll bring him to 12. Now I'll play Avengers Assemble for 4 resources. Ready each Avenger character you control to the end of the phase. Each Avenger character in play gets +1 attack and +1 thwart.
I'm going to go ahead and attack for 5 more, bringing him down to 7. I'll attack with Wasp for 3, bringing him to 4. I don't really need to put these counters on here at this point, but attack for 3 more. That will kill Ronan. Bring him to 1. And Hawkeye with the kill shot for 0. So there we have it. Avengers Antman, very strong build. So